on a block or a pillow or a blanket. Sometimes that can help to align the spine a little bit more. So it puts your pelvis a little higher than your knees, and it gives rush dog. I know. Go lie down, please. They can't see me when you're right here. Go lie down. Gives the pelvis a little bit more lift so that you can find more of that neutral spine. And so, Jan, you are familiar with these because I use them in our sessions. So a lot of the things that you see in our one-on-one sessions, I use in my yoga class. So, and this is more of a mindful movement class. So it's a combination of breath work, movement, and then taking those movements into yoga poses. So the IDQs, which help to put the curves of your spine more into their natural state, which helps to create load share along the region of the spine. And they are chin tucked. And that means bringing the chin in towards your neck and then drawing it slightly up towards your throat. And when this happens, you create length not only in the front of your spine, but also the back of your spine. So putting the cervical spine into that slightly curved forward position. Collarbones are broad, so the shoulders are neither up nor down, but somewhere in that comfortable position. We've worked the last 4 sessions on really finding the stability of the shoulder girdle by creating more of that sense of ease rather than over exaggerating any direction of the shoulder blades. So broadening across the front rather than taking the shoulder blades in and down. Fronts of the ribs and the bottom of the rib cage move slightly in towards the midline and slightly down towards your pelvis. So creating that awareness of contraction or engagement of the upper transverse abdominis. And then the front and the back of your pelvis is in relative neutral. So if you were to find your hip points, those bony points at the front of your pelvis, and then your thumbs on the back of your pelvis, they will be in relative neutral. There's no perfection in posture. So relative is always a good word to take into your mind and body, and allowing the sense of ease to kind of be your guide. And I think I've shared this in past classes. When the spine is in its neutral curves and being supported on all sides by the musculature, it's almost as if you feel nothing. Excess tension. Bring your awareness with your mind into that space of tension, and instead of trying to fix it, just notice. Notice if you're breathing. Notice as your mind and your breath become into your awareness, are there any shifts? And so just taking a few more moments to move through the regions of your body, looking for tension. And instead of allowing the mind to go to the why, just notice where you are now. And as the mind comes into the present space, what happens? And so the structure, oftentimes what we think of as our posture, although it does play a role in how we move around the world, That's not just the only thing. In yoga, we talk about the mind body breath or mind body spirit connection and being present in where our body is now, despite our structure or in spite of our structure. And for me, oftentimes when I feel tension, this also shows up in my breath. Either I'm holding my breath or I'm breathing shallow, meaning I feel my upper chest move. So eyes can remain closed or you can keep them slightly open. Bring one of your hands to your upper chest and your other hand to the region of the bottom of your rib cage. So where the bottom of your rib cage meets your belly or abdomen area. And just breathe normally. So releasing any thought of what the perfect breath might look like. Just breathe. And with your hands in these two locations, start to notice where you feel your breath. And it may be under one of the hands, it may be under both of the hands. And just begin by acknowledging or feeling or sensing. And if you do feel movements of the breath underneath your hand that's on your chest, can you begin to quiet the breath in this region? Meaning, can you reduce the amount of movement you feel underneath your hand at your chest? And this may look like a lot of different things. It may be that you feel yourself consciously bring the breath lower. It may be that you quiet the breath entirely. Quieting the movement of the breath. Lessening the volume of the breath. And knowing that if this is not comfortable, you always have that option to breathe. And then how long can it take you to come back into that more quiet, low, and slow breath? So as we come into the space of the more subtle breath, notice those common areas of tension throughout the body. Notice the mind. And knowing that sometimes using this subtle breathing can cause stress and tension as well. So if you are feeling that, just know that's okay. And then release the hands, letting them rest on your thighs are in your lap. You're returning the breath to normal. So again, not trying to control the breath, and just notice what you notice. And slowly open your eyes. I have my visitor back. I apologize for this. He usually checks out after the first couple of minutes, but that's not happening these days. Okay, so if you have a block, we're going to use that. We're going to use the belt. And if you don't have these, I will give you other options. So don't feel like they're necessary. They just kind of can add to sensation. So with your belt, you're going to create a loop that is about, if you were to have your block between your knees, you want to be able to wrap your knees around the block so it basically will squeeze. And we are going to come into now a kneeling position. So you can place one of your blocks or a blanket or a cushion between your heels and sit back on the block. And place the block, the other block between your knees, and then wrap the belt around. And if you don't have these, no big deal. You want to pull the belt somewhat taut. And then whether you have the equipment or not, just set in this. This is called Vajrasana pose. So the hips are in flexion, the knees are in flexion, the ankles are opening on the front. So if you have the block between your knees, start to squeeze the block between your thighs. If you don't have the block, cross your wrist and place the fingers on the insides of your knees. So you can do this without the block and get the same sensation. But if you have the block, squeeze the block between your thighs. If not, wrist cross and press your knees into your hands. So either way, create that sensation of your inner thighs pushing inward. And then come back into the space of your breath if your eyes are closed or open. You're creating a sense of tension in the thighs, the inner thighs. These are your adductors, so they add the legs to the midline. And I say that because adductors is sometimes easier for me to say than inner thighs. So once you feel that sensation, squeeze in a little bit more. Notice how far up it comes. So you may feel it closer to the knees. Can you bring that awareness all the way into your inner groins? Because some of the adductors, all of the adductors are up in the inner thighs. Some of them go down, just a couple go down and attach to the knees, but all of them are hip muscles. So now the opposite of that is pushing out. So if you have the belt there, you can push into the belt. If you don't have the belt there, you can take your hands and push your knees out into your hands. So create that awareness of legs moving apart. This is abduction. So the outer thighs move the legs apart. So what your abductors and adductors do, other than that motion of in and out, we don't do that a whole lot. They stabilize the hips on the inside and on the outside. Specifically, every step we take. And it's going to kind of be the cue for the class today and how that shows up in the rest of your body. So now, can you do both of these things at the same time? Can you create the awareness of coming in and pushing out at the same time? It's hard. But these are what the muscles do to stabilize the top of the leg bone inside your hip socket, right? And sometimes we have some stabilization issues when these don't cooperate quite the way they do. So notice what is easier for you. For me, adduction is way easier. It's harder for me to push in and out at the same time. But I feel a little bit more awareness of that inner thigh connection. Good. Let it go. And come up standing. So if you have this, you can continue to use it. If you don't, I will give you other keys. So if you have the block, you're going to place the block up between your thighs as high as you can. And I would suggest putting the belt on the outside first and not do it the way that I did. But you're going to place the belt around just the tops of your knees and come to the back of your the back of your the back. I've got something in my throat, and every time I try to say the word back, it catches. Okay, so come to the back of your mat. If you don't have the block there, you're fine. Just step your feet hip distance apart. If you have the block, take the feet as narrow as you can. You might have to adjust your belt a little bit. Start to bring awareness to your inner edges of your feet. Look down at your feet and make sure the outer edges of your feet are parallel. So as you push down through the inner edges of your feet, notice what happens to that connection of the thighs with your blocks. If you don't have the blocks there, you can bend your knees and again, take your hands crossing your wrists and push in, right? So you can find that connection that way too. I think it might work better if the block is long and between your knees instead of your thighs. So press down through the inner edges. Lift your toes off the ground and keep the ball mounts of your big toes on the ground. Your pinky toes are also on the ground, but more weight is placed on the inner edges of your feet. So notice what happens as you bring the weight to the inner edge of the feet to those inner thigh muscles and your block, right? So without even pressing the thighs into the block, just bringing the weight to the inner edge of the foot does that. Now shift to the outer edge of your foot, so the pinky edge of your foot, and notice what happens to the legs and the belt, right? And then find somewhere in between, so pressing through the inner edge and the outer edge of your feet equally, lifting your toes off the floor if you put them back down, and feel that charge up all the way through your legs. So you feel it on the fronts of your thighs, you feel it on the backs, outer hips, inner thighs. Keep that awareness and bring your toes back down to the ground. So when we are standing in this neutral position with both of our feet on the floor, we have that awareness of stability, right? Creates a lot of stability in the hip joint, creating a lot of stability in the rest of the body. So stay in this position and bring your arms over your head. Notice what happens as you start to move the rest of your body. What happens to the awareness of your legs, and bring it back, finding a slight awareness of the thighs pressing in, outer thighs pressing out, feet, inner edge and outer edge. Bring your hands behind your head and just gently go side to side. So as you find that stability, the strength in the lower body, what happens to the spine? And it may be different for you, but for me, I feel that I can mobilize my spine way easier when I'm moving from a stable base, right? And you can even start to add kind of flexion and rotation, creating circles with the spine, moving the other direction. Notice when you lose that awareness of your legs, the base, the stability. And it's not that that's bad, but for today's purposes, what we're looking at is creating stability and moving the rest of the spine from that sense of stability to create more space, more freedom. Good. Come back to center, bring the arms down and breathe. Close your eyes. And go back into that practice that we started at the beginning of class. Noticing where you feel tension, and not the kind of tension that we have in our legs right now. That's tension for a purpose, but kind of where your normal holding patterns of the body are. Notice if you're breathing. And then can you use those places where you feel tension? Can you feel the breath create movement in that space? So for me, one of my spots where I have tension or that sense of stuck is in my mid spine, right around the bottom of the rib cage, on the back of my body. And I can barely feel my breath move here sometimes. So I'm taking my mind into that space just to see if I can use the breath to create a little bit more movement. And what I find interesting is that though that's my normal place, that when I have this stable base of the legs and my pelvis, that area where I normally feel tension lessens, right? So just notice what you notice. And then open your eyes if they're closed. Keep the block where it is if it's there. If not, don't worry about it. We're going to go into chair pose. So knees bend forward and hips move back. If you don't have a block, you can cross your wrist, place your hands between your thighs. Start with the awareness of your inner edges of your feet, pressing down, noticing it come up your legs. And then after you have that, then bring the awareness of the thighs pressing in. And then bring your awareness to the outer edges, move your hands or knees into the belt and find that outer. Bring your arms over the head. Can you balance your awareness between inner and outer hip, or adductors and abductors? Notice as you bring awareness to those regions of your hip. I know they're hard to think of them as hip muscles because so much of them are on our legs, but they control the movement of the hip. So they're hip muscles. So as you bring awareness to this balance between the inner and outer hips, does this pose become any easier? Or maybe it becomes harder. Good. Release and fold forward. Let go of the tension. So let go of the awareness and just move. You can go ahead and remove the blocks and the belt. So as we move through the rest of the practice, we're going to take this awareness with us and find this connection of your pelvis, your hips, with the rest of the body, and how, as we move to stability in the lower body, we can create more movement or mobility in the rest of the body. Inhale, come up halfway. Bring the hands to the fronts of your shins, right below your knees. Start to press your shins towards your hands and press your hands back into your shins. So we're creating now this awareness on the front of the thighs. Allow your hips to shift back in space. So forget the idea of having your hips over your heels, and instead place your center of gravity, your navel, above the top of your foot. Continue to press shins and hands together. Inner thighs connecting to the inner edges of your feet. Roll them back, almost as if you're trying to press that block back, even though the block's no longer there. And then find the outer edge as if your hips are hugging in. Good. So we're in this neutral position. Both feet are on the ground, equal weight. We're using this for stability. Exhale, keep the hips back, fold forward. Press down through your feet, inner and outer edges of your feet, and come all the way up. Hands down beside your hips. Feet ground down. Legs stand strong. Inhale, reach up, stretch up. So hands over your head. Move the hips back in space, hinge from your hips, and fold, either with legs straight or bent. Inhale, halfway lift, hands to your shins, press them together. Inner edges of your feet, inner thighs. Outer edges of your feet, outer hips, fold forward. Walk the hands towards the front of your mat. Walk your feet back. Press down through your hands. We can create that same awareness in our upper body through our hands. So press through the inner edges of your hands. Press through the outer edges of your hands. Feel that energy move up your arms to stabilize your shoulders. Keep the shoulders in relative neutral. So we're not taking the shoulders either up nor down. Lift high up onto your toes. Firm the fronts of your thighs at where they connect into your hips. So where the hip bone, the top of the leg bone meets in that socket. Press the top of the leg bone back. Press the pinky edges down. Feel the outer hips. Press the big toe down. Feel the inner hips. Press the tops of the thighs back. Lower the knees to the floor. Point the toes back and sit back. So knees can open slightly wider to rest your belly between your thighs, resting your forehead on the floor. So Jan, I often say the cue simple, not easy. We're not doing a lot yet, mostly standing and sitting and folding. But with this awareness of attention and stability, it can sometimes feel like a lot. And shift forward on the hands and knees. And bring your right leg forward. So we're coming more into what we do when we walk, right? So every step we take, we're balancing on one leg. And so the left knee is our standing leg. And just notice, like, what do you notice when you're here? If you're not doing all the things that we're learning so far, if you can see me, you can probably see that this hip for me kind of popped out, right? So I am probably using more of my adductor rather than a balance between. The front leg is when we are walking, that leg that moves forward. And the natural tendency for that leg is adduction. So bring the back of your hand inside of your right knee. Look down at your right foot and press the big toe mount and your inner heel down into the ground. At the same time, pull the heel back as if you're dragging it. It doesn't move, more of an isometric. Notice what starts to happen to this leg. I can already feel some awareness here. Take your left hand and place it on your outer hip, as if you were pulling or sucking that hip out of your hand. So allow your outer hip muscle to engage. So we have a little bit more awareness on the inner edge of our front foot. We have an awareness of the outer hip, like we're pushing the knee out to hug the hip in, which is really challenging on your knee. Bring your arms over your head. Inhale here. As you exhale, keep this awareness of the stability in your lower body as you start to twist. Bringing the left hand reaching forward and the right hand reaching back. Inhale, arms come over your head, turn forward. So we're going to explore this. So begin to move in and out of this. Notice how much stability you have with that awareness of front foot pressing down, back knee kind of pushing forward and hugging in. Notice what's happening in your spine. Notice the tendency to lose balance, which is really normal. And when you do, check in. Where's the weight on your front foot? Did it go to the outside of your foot? Where's the outer left hip? Next time you twist open, stay open. Start to fold, bringing your left hand either to the floor or a block inside of your right foot. You can walk the right foot slightly forward to bring the hand closer to the floor if you don't have a block. You could also fold your mat under or put a blanket under your left knee. Stay up on your fingertips. Press down through the inner edge of your front foot and drag back. Press down through the front of your left shin and push the knee forward. Hand could maybe come all the way down to the floor. Right arm reaches up, gaze up towards your thumb. So we have strength and stability in our hips and our legs, adding to the awareness of mobility in your spine, maybe creating more of that awareness in a twist. Bring both hands to the floor. Bring the right leg beside the left leg, tuck your toes under, and lift your hips up and back into downward facing dog. Take a moment here to let go of the tension. So move. And as you move, notice what you notice. So as we stabilize more, we may be open to more mobility. So creating stability in the joints may lead to more mobility. Creating strength in the muscles may lead to more length in the muscles. Come down to hands and knees and switch. So bring the other leg forward. So left leg forward. Right hip is above your right knee. Back toe can either be tucked under or not. It's more of a challenge if the toes are not tucked under because there's less stability. Bring the back of your left hand inside of your left knee and begin to press down through the ball mount of your big toe, your inner heel. You'll feel the knee automatically go in, hopefully with some awareness of the adductors. Start to drag isometrically heel back, and as you pull it back, feel right knee push forward. So the muscle that is pushing the right knee forward is your glute maximus to the back of your hip. What about your outer hip? Is that still on? So bring your hand to the outer hip as if you are hugging the hip in. So you can imagine your leg bone. You don't have to imagine it is, but your leg bone is in the hip socket. And as with any surface, if the leg of the table or whatever, if the table is tilted at all, there's no stability. The pelvis is the same way. If the leg bone is out, we lose that stability. So create that awareness, then bring the arms up. And then from the stability of the legs, can you mobilize the spine? And explore. Is there a side that's harder? Are you more able to stabilize in the hips on one side? Does one rotation of the spine feel more easeful than the other? Is that connected to the same hip that perhaps there's instability in. And maybe so, maybe not. That is not always the case, but it's just something to be curious about. Next time you twist open, stay open. Walk the left foot slightly forward and then reach right hand to the ground. Press down through the inner edge of your left foot, pull back. Press down through the front of your right shin, push right knee forward, and then twist, reaching, left hand up to the sky. One of the things that some people may find uncomfortable is rotating the neck up towards the hand. And if it's comfortable for you, all means look forward or even down. But when you move from a more stable pelvis, is there perhaps more movement in the neck? You can go up that far. Release both hands to the ground. Left knee besides right knee, and press back again into downward facing dog. Create some movement here. So letting go of the tension. Noticing what you're feeling in your hips, outer and inner thighs, perhaps even the hamstrings, the back of the hamstrings. Because sometimes a hamstring muscle can be tight in relationship to something else not working to stabilize. Come up onto your both toes, gaze forward, and step or hop to the front of your mat. And send the hips back, hands to your shins, press hands and shins together. Inner thighs connect to inner edges of your feet. Outer hips connect to outer edges of your feet. Keep the awareness of legs active and fold. Inhale, reach up, stretch up, arms come over your head, gaze up. Exhale, hands to heart center. So starting to take this away from the floor, because when we walk, we're not on our knees. So balancing on your right foot. Bring your left knee forward. And notice what happens if you shift more weight to the inner edge or outer edge of your foot. So you're balancing on your right foot, put more of the weight on the inner edge of your foot. Lose balance, put more of the weight on the outer edge of your foot. We lose balance. Can you balance between the inner and outer edge of your foot? So press down through both edges. Find inner thigh, outer hip. So that awareness of how we had it on the block, and bring your hands to your hips. In this natural position, your left hip will be slightly higher. That's fine. Now rotate this knee in and out. And if balance is an issue, take your leg lower, right? You can even bring the toes on the ground. But what we're working on is the standing leg, not this leg. This leg is just making our standing leg work harder. So notice where the weight transfers on your foot as you move the other leg. Can you have the awareness of your feet and your thigh muscles, inner and outer thigh muscles working together to stabilize? And maybe you can't, that's okay too. Step, left leg all the way back. So when we are in a position where one leg is forward and the other leg is back, we have opposite muscles to stabilize, right? So for every step we take, one leg is back, the other leg is forward, or it swings forward and the other face. So the standing leg, we always want enough weight on. But when one leg is forward or one leg is back, it's more of a focus between abduction and adduction. So take the back of the right hand and place it on the inside of your right thigh. Find a little bit more weight on the inner edge of your foot and your inner thigh. And then bring awareness as if you're pushing the knee out into the belt without losing that awareness of pushing in. The back leg is behind us, so a little bit more awareness. as if you're pressing the outer heel and the pinky toe to the wall behind you. Inhale, bring your arms over your head. Did you lose it? So find the stability of the legs. Find that action. Inner edge, front foot. Outer edge, back foot. Inhale. As you exhale, twist to the right. Inhale, arms back up. So explore this. The legs are active, meaning they're engaged. You can check in, finding inner edge of front foot without the knee dumping in. So the outer hip is active. More of the weight is reaching through the outer heel and pressing through the pinky toe. Notice what's happening to your spine. Next time you come up, stay up. Drop your left heel down and in and rotate open to Virabhadrasana 2. You may have to widen your stance. So now we're in a position of abduction, yeah, legs are wide. So we want to find that weight balance. So press first through the inner edge of both feet. Notice the inner thigh connection. Now press down through the outer edges of your feet. Thighs are strong. Arms out. Start by gazing over your right fingertips. Gaze over your left fingertips. Without moving your pelvis, rotate your rib cage towards your left hand. Continue to press through the outer edge of your back heel. A little bit more awareness on the inner edge of your front foot. Inhale, reach back, take your left hand to the outer edge of your left thigh and reach right arm to your ear. Your hand is on the back of your left thigh. Push your thigh into your hand. So not the outer thigh, but the back of the thigh. Press down through the outer heel, reach back a little bit more. Straighten your front leg. Press down through the outer edge of your left heel, inner edge of your right foot, and stretch with your side body long. Bringing your hand to your shin, ankle, a block, or the floor. Take your left hand across, grab your right rib cage. Or just push your hand into your right rib cage. Outer heel of your left foot. Feel it come up into this outer hip. Inner edge of your right foot. Notice if the knee turns in and turn it out. Take your left hand, rotate your rib cage open to the left more, and then push your rib cage down into your hand and reach. Left arm up towards this guy. So if your spine is in its neutral curves, which is a little complicated here, but let's say we're not in a side crunch. If you are moving your rib cage more towards the floor, your right rib cage, you might find more length in your spine to allow your head to turn up and look at your right thumb, left thumb. Have you lost the awareness of your legs? What happens if you do lose the awareness of your legs? What happens if you stop pushing through your feet? What happens if you stop firming your outer hips and inner thighs? I have to bend my knee. And you may have to bend your knee regardless, but what happens when more of that awareness, that stability comes into play? Bend your right knee. Bring both hands on either side of your right foot. Step back, this time into plank pose. So shoulders above your wrist. If you can't bring your knees off the floor, knees can be down, but keep your shoulders above your wrist and your hips down in line with your shoulders. Use the same awareness here. So press towards the wall behind you with the inner edges of your feet, so your inner thighs. And then the outer edges of your feet, feel your outer hips. How does this affect your plank pose? Either drop your knees to the floor or keep your plank and lower your whole body down to the floor. Rest your forehead on your hands. Take your feet mat distance apart and swivel your hips. So letting the awareness go, coming back into the movement of your breath. And then slowly start to lessen your shifting of your hips side to side, lessening it until it becomes stillness. And what do you notice? What do you feel going in the right side? I feel like this vibration in the entire right side of my body, which is actually my left side, but I demoed it as my right side. So the side with the leg was forward. I feel this awareness of like vibration, but it also feels lighter than my left side. And I feel this come all the way up into my low back, and it feels solid, stable. Good. Bring your hands underneath your shoulders, press up into hands and knees, and then press back into downward facing dog. How does your down dog feel after concentrating on one side so long? Inhale, come up onto your toes, gaze between your thumbs. Bend your knees and step or hop to the front of your mat, feet between your hands. Hands to your shins, press them together, hips move back, spine parallel to the floor. Inner thighs, outer thighs, feet connect. Exhale, fold. Inhale, reach up, stretch up, arms come over your head, ground down through the feet, reach up through the side bodies and hands. Hands beside your hips. I'll go to the other side. So weight on your left foot. Notice my tendency on my left foot is to move my heel in. It's my thing. Can you keep the outer edge of your foot down? This is my hard side. Lift the other knee up. What happens when you shift more of the weight to the right, or the inner edge and outer edge? Noticing that connection to balance or lack of balance, maybe your habits. What feels more normal is usually a habit. And then find both sides pushing down. Find the awareness of your outer hip and your inner thigh. Your right hip will be slightly higher. And then challenge that balance by moving the leg. This is really hard for me. My right hip really wants to help. And what I really want to do is move that heel in so I have more balance. So that's just an interesting thing for me to explore. And when you're ready, bend front knee and step the other leg to the back of your mat. We're coming into that high lunge. Bring the back of your left hand inside of your left knee. Press inward. Inner edge of your foot. Knee pressing inward, but not dumping inward. So hug the outer left hip in, but keep the weight more on the right inner edge. Back foot, we're pressing more through the outer heel and pinky toe. So back leg is super strong, front leg is super active, outer hips hugging in, inner edge of the front thigh, outer edge of the back foot, arms over your head. So moving from the space of grounding or stability, mobilize the spine. So testing. How much rotation can you move without moving your hips? So oftentimes we deepen a twist by moving the hips, which is not really deepening a twist, it's moving the hips. What is your tendency here? For me, when I go into a twist, my left hip or my right hip wants to pop out. So I notice that. Maybe it comes from stabilizing more my left leg. Maybe it comes from pressing through the inner edge of my front foot. Next time you come out, stay up and rotate open. And moving into Virabhadrasana 2, Warrior 2. So now we're in abduction. So outer edges of our feet first. Press down through the outer edges of your feet. Find your outer hips. And the front leg especially, press a little bit more through the inner edge. Arms reach out. Turn your head over your left hand. Keep the legs and the hips where they are. Rotate your head to look over your right hand. Then rotate your rib cage that way too. So the ribs move, pelvis doesn't. Keep that rotation in your rib cage. Turn your head back to look over your left hand. Inhale, reach back. Right hand comes to the back of the right thigh. Left arm to the ear. Push your thigh into your hand. So it's as if you're moving it back in space. Notice how that brings more weight to your outer back heel. Find a little bit more awareness of the inner edge of your front foot. Sink a little deeper, arch back more. Lift thigh into hand. Straighten left leg. Press down through the inner edge of your foot, outer edge of your back foot. Keep the side body long and bring the hand to the shin, the ankle, or the floor. Press down through your right outer heel. Feel the outer hip. Press down through the inner edge of the front foot, rolling the knee out. Legs are strong. Reach across. Grab the left side of your rib cage. Start by rotating or pulling it towards the sky, and then push your rib cage down towards your fingertips. So lengthening the spine, and reach right arm up. Go back into that breathing that we found at the beginning of the class. Where do you find tension? Where can you use the breath to kind of breathe into those regions of tension? Which means, can you create movement with the breath? And maybe you can't do that in your hips, but maybe you can do that around your spine. Turn your head to look down at your left foot. Bend your left knee, bring both hands on either side of your left foot, and step your left foot beside your right foot, moving into plank. Use what your body has learned. So find what you need to find to stabilize. Plank becomes so much easier when we stabilize. Either dropping down to your knees or lowering all the way down, chaturanga. Rest your forehead on your hands, feet wide, mat distance apart, and swivel your hips side to side. I'm going to take one back bend before we finish. So come up onto your elbows. So elbows underneath your shoulders. Spread your fingers. So we're finding the base with our hands first. So press the hands down and isometrically pull the elbows back towards your feet, lifting your chest, the top of your chest. And you may notice that this dumps into your low back when you have no active legs. So press your feet down. Press the inner edge of your foot, and then especially rolling the outer edge of your foot towards the floor. Notice what happens to your legs. Reach your tailbone between your heels as you peel your pubic bone up towards your navel. Keep the legs firm. Take 2 more breaths. Find your IDQ, so chin tucked, neck long, collarbones broad. Fronts of the ribs down and in slightly. Pelvis in relative neutral, which is interesting in a backpack. And then release. Rest your forehead on your hands. Swivel your hips side to side, letting your ankles move side to side as well. Keep your right hand on the floor, rest your head on your right hand, and bring your left hand out to the side, kind of in line with the your breast. Push down through your left hand and bring your left knee out to the side, so like a frog. You can either keep your hand out to the side, or if you want to go back to stacking your both hands and resting your forehead on both hands, either one is fine. Let all the tension go. So oftentimes when I spend a full class with a lot of awareness on my legs, I find that I have a tendency to continue that tension even in a more relaxed position. So just notice where that tension is. And perhaps you can feel the breath move, especially if it's in, say, the hip, the outer hip, which is where mine is. It doesn't necessarily mean yours will be there. Bring the hand back out to the side, and then bring the left leg down. Switch. So hand stays, left hand stays under the forehead, right hand comes out to the side, push down to bring left or right knee out to the side like a frog. You can either keep your hand there or you can stack the hands again and just breathe. So what I find is interesting, and this may or may not be the same as what you feel. The muscle that I had such a hard time, like when I was bringing my left knee out, I felt tension in my outer hip, and it was hard to let go of it. And knowing what I know about my own body, that's a muscle that on me tends to be a little less responsive. So in my mind, I feel like I did some good work because I got it to activate to the point where it was hesitant to let go. So tension doesn't always mean bad, I guess is what I'm trying to say. In my awareness, the fact that my outer hip was continuing to remain tense even after I asked it to relax, at least told me that I was doing something. Go ahead and bring your right leg down. Take just a few breaths here in this prone position. Coming back into the awareness of your body. Noticing what you notice. Noticing if anything has shifted or changed in any way. And if you do feel areas of tension, are those areas of tension the same that you felt at the beginning of class, or have they changed? And what happens when you bring the awareness of the mind and the breath into that space of tension without judgment, with just presence? When you are ready, use your hands to press yourself up, either coming into a regular seated position or just pressing your heels back onto your hips. Coming into any position where your hips are in neutral and you can feel the natural curves of your spine. Your natural, normal breath. And bringing one hand back to your chest, one hand back to the bottom of the rib cage, and notice as the breath shifted. And can you quiet the space beneath the hand on your chest? Quieting the sound of your breath. Slowing down the pace of your breath and lessening the volume of your breath. Return both hands back to your thighs. Blink your eyes open